It all started when I moved into what I thought was my dream neighborhood. Quiet streets, clean sidewalks, friendly-looking houses. I was excited. I had just bought my first home. And honestly, the best part? It had a pool. A real one. Right in the backyard. I couldn't wait to enjoy peaceful weekends, just floating and relaxing. That was the plan, at least. Then I met her. Karen, the president of the HOA. You know, the type, tight smile, clipboard always in hand, always just checking in. At first, I tried to stay polite. I'd wave when I saw her. Kept my lawn trimmed just the way the rule book said. I didn't want any trouble. But she was always watching. Always around. Every little thing. She had something to say about it. My trash bins weren't aligned properly. My garden hose was visible from the street. It was exhausting. Then one day, she knocked on my door with a big fake smile. Hey there, just a heads up. We're hosting my daughter's wedding next Saturday. It'll be in our backyard. Hope that's okay. I nodded, a little unsure, but said, sure, congratulations to her. She grinned wider. Great. And of course, your pool will be a wonderful spot for the guests to cool off in. I blinked. Wait, what? She didn't ask. She didn't say, can they use it? She said will, like it was already decided. I thought maybe I misheard her. I asked, you mean you want to use my pool during the wedding? She looked confused, like I was the weird one. Well, yes, it just makes sense. It's right there. Everyone will love it. I'm sure you won't mind. I stood there in shock. I didn't even know these people. And she wanted strangers, dozens of them, in my backyard, swimming in my pool, without even asking first. She didn't wait for me to answer, just smiled again and said, thanks so much. It's going to be perfect. Then turned around and walked away. I closed the door slowly, staring out the window at her as she left. My heart was racing. Who does that? And that was just the beginning. I was still standing in my living room, just stunned. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, trying to make it make sense. Did she really just claim my pool for her daughter's wedding? Without asking? Without even pretending to be polite about it? At first, I thought maybe I was overreacting. Maybe she assumed I'd be okay with it, and just got a little ahead of herself. Maybe this was just a misunderstanding. So, the next day, I walked over to her house to talk it out. I figured I'd be honest, set a boundary, but keep it civil. She opened the door with that same fake smile. Hey, Karen. I started trying to sound friendly. About the wedding, I just wanted to clarify something. I'm really not comfortable with strangers using my pool. I've put a lot of work into maintaining it, and I'm just not okay with that. Her smile dropped. Not completely, but enough to reveal the irritation underneath. She blinked a few times. Oh, I see. Well, I just assumed, since we're neighbors, and since this is such a big event for our family. I kept my voice calm. I get that, and congrats again, but it's still my property. I'm not comfortable having a bunch of people I don't know using it. I'm sorry. That's when the mask slipped. Her whole expression changed. She stepped forward slightly, almost like she was trying to intimidate me. You do realize you're part of the HOA now, right? She said sharply. There are community expectations. You agreed to follow the rules when you bought your home. I frowned. I read the rule book. Nowhere does it say I have to offer up my personal pool for other people's events. She scoffed. It's called being a good neighbor. I didn't say anything. Just looked at her. She gave a tight laugh. Fine. If you want to be difficult, go ahead. But don't be surprised if the HOA board hears about this. And she shut the door in my face. I stood there for a moment, stunned. Did she just threaten me over my own pool? Things got worse after that. Over the next few days, I started noticing little things happening around my house. My mailbox had been left open. My garbage can was tipped over one morning, even though I knew I'd secured it the night before. A neighbor who used to wave at me suddenly turned their head and walked the other way. Then came the HOA complaints. First, it was a warning letter about my lawn being 1.5 inches too tall. I measured it myself. It was fine. Then another complaint. My porch light was too bright at night. Next, A notice saying someone had reported loud music from my house on a Tuesday night. I wasn't even home. It was clear what was happening. Karen was using her position on the HOA to harass me, to punish me for saying no. The thing is, I don't like being pushed around. I didn't want drama. I didn't ask for it. But if she was going to make this a game, fine. I'd play. Quietly, calmly. But I'd play. One evening, I overheard her talking to another neighbor while I was watering my plants. She didn't see me, but her voice carried over the fence. "Oh, it's going to be such a beautiful day," she was saying. "The decorations are going to be perfect. And the best part? The guests will have that stunning pool to enjoy. It's like having a resort next door." The neighbor asked something I couldn't quite hear, and Karen laughed. "Oh, he's being difficult, but he'll come around. He won't want to look bad in front of everyone. Trust me." I stood there, frozen. So this wasn't a misunderstanding. She really thought she could pressure me into giving in. That's when the idea hit me. If she wanted her guests to enjoy the pool so badly, maybe I'd let them, just not in the way she expected. I spent the next few days doing research. Quietly, carefully. I didn't tell anyone what I was planning. Did you know you can actually fill a swimming pool with Jello? Okay, not technically Jello, because that would be ridiculously expensive. But with bulk gelatin powder, water, and some patience, you can get a pretty convincing result. I started ordering boxes of gelatin online. Hundreds of them. Strawberry flavor, mostly. It didn't matter, but the red color felt dramatic. Perfect, really. I stored the boxes in my garage, stacking them neatly behind tools and boxes, so they wouldn't draw attention. Every night after work, I'd boil giant pots of water on a portable propane burner and mix in gelatin, then pour it slowly into the pool. It took days, but slowly the water started to thicken. The bright red surface began to jiggle, just slightly when the wind blew. I bought a pool cover and laid it lightly over the top during the day, so no one would see what was happening. The day before the wedding, the pool was done, fully set. It looked like a shimmering red lake. Not liquid anymore, but not totally solid either. Just enough that anyone jumping in would be in for a nasty surprise. And then the wedding day came. I stayed inside that morning. Karen and her family were outside setting up the backyard with flowers, tables, and folding chairs. Music played. Laughter carried through the air. Guests started to arrive, dressed in pastel dresses and button-up shirts, holding gifts and taking photos. I peeked through the blinds and waited. It didn't take long. A group of guests wandered over to the fence separating our yards. One of them pointed at the pool. Another laughed. A third called out, "Wow, what a setup. Can we jump in?" Then they opened the gate. My gate. I watched them step onto my lawn like they owned it. Karen was behind them, waving and smiling. "Of course, go ahead," she called. "That's what it's there for." I grabbed my phone and started recording. The first guy dipped a toe in. He paused. Then he tried stepping in. And that's when it happened. His foot didn't go down. It just pressed against the jiggly red surface. Confused, he tried again. The surface gave a little, but not enough. He looked down and said, "What the?" Another guest tried to jump in, expecting a splash. Instead, they landed with a wet, squishy sound, half embedded in red goo. Screams, laughter, then disgust. Someone yelled, "Is this Jello?" Karen rushed over, looking horrified. "What is this? What did you do?" she shouted across the fence. I opened my back door and stepped outside, cameras still rolling. "Oh, I figured if your guests were going to use the pool, I'd give them something memorable," I said, not gloating, just satisfied. She turned red. "You ruined everything." I shrugged. "You should have asked." The guests, now covered in sticky red gelatin, were trying to climb out of the pool. Some were slipping. One guy was just sitting there, shaking his head. Karen stormed toward me, but stopped when she saw the camera in my hand. "You can't film this," she snapped. "Oh, I can," I said calmly. "It's my property, just like the pool." That's when she completely lost it. She whipped out her phone and called someone. A few minutes later, flashing lights appear at the end of the street. The police. When the officers walked up, Karen started ranting immediately. He sabotaged the pool. He did this on purpose to embarrass us. It's dangerous. One officer held up his hand. Ma'am, whose pool is it? She looked at him like he was an idiot. But then he can do whatever he wants with it. The officer said simply. She went silent. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked like she was about to explode. The officer turned to me. Sir, are you okay? Any issues with the guests trespassing? I nodded. I didn't give them permission to enter. I'd like to ask them to leave my property. The officer turned back to the soggy wedding guests. You heard him, folks. Let's clear out. One by one, they climbed out, dripping with red goo, shoes ruined, dresses stained. The party atmosphere was gone. Silent, awkward, embarrassed. Karen stood frozen, her jaw clenched, her face pale. She didn't say another word. She just turned around and walked back to her yard, her shoes making a sticky sound with every step. And me? I just stood there, watching, not smiling. After the gelatin incident, things got quiet, at least for a little while. Karen didn't come storming over the next day. She didn't leave another HOA notice taped to my door. In fact, I didn't see her at all. Her car was there, her porch light was on at night, but no sign of her during the day. I knew that kind of silence wasn't peace. It was a calm before the next storm. And sure enough, a week later, I got a letter, certified mail, HOA letterhead, signed by Karen herself. Violation notice. Misuse of property resulting in community disruption. I almost laughed. Almost. But I didn't, because it wasn't funny anymore. She wasn't just trying to boss me around. She was trying to ruin me. She'd filed an official complaint saying I'd created a hazardous environment and intentionally disrupted a community event, which was hilarious considering the entire mess was her idea in the first place. The letter said I owed a fine of $500, and if I didn't pay within 10 days, it would double. She was using the HOA like a personal weapon, and she really thought she could scare me with it. But I wasn't scared. I was pissed, and I was done playing defense. So I got to work. Not revenge this time. Not more Jello. I didn't need any more surprises. I needed the truth. And I needed proof. I started talking to neighbors. Carefully. Not everyone. Just the ones who hadn't turned cold. Turns out, I wasn't the only one Karen had clashed with. One guy down the block had gotten 3 fines in a single month for having unapproved garden decorations. Another family said Karen tried to force them to repaint their front door because the shade of blue wasn't aesthetically pleasing. The more I listened, the more stories came out. The same pattern, over and over. Karen made a demand. People pushed back. She retaliated. With letters. With fines. With rumors. I asked one neighbor if he'd ever actually seen the HOA rules Karen claimed to enforce. He said no, just a welcome packet when he moved in, and even that was missing a few pages. That's when I got suspicious. So, I requested a copy of the HOA charter and rules. Officially, it took them a while. They dragged their feet. But legally, they had to give it to me. And when I finally got my hands on it, it was thin, like too thin. I flipped through the pages and realized something wasn't right. The rule Karen cited in my fine, the one about misuse of property, it wasn't there. Not even close. In fact, most of the fines she'd issued to people were based on made-up rules, stretched interpretations, or completely fabricated clauses. She'd been bluffing the whole time. I scanned the documents, highlighted the inconsistencies, and started building a case. Then I went to the board. The HOA board was made up of 5 people, including Karen. The other 4 rarely said much. She ran the meetings, made the motions, and everyone just kind of nodded along. But when I showed up with a folder full of paperwork and complaints from other homeowners, things changed. I didn't go in angry. I went in calm, clear, direct. I'm not here to make a scene, I said, holding up the letter Karen sent me. But I'm being fined for something that isn't in the rules. And I'm not the only one. I laid out the documents on the table. A list of neighbors. Their fines. The fake rules. Side-by-side comparisons with the official HOA handbook, a printed transcript of what she'd said to me about the pool, taken directly from a video I recorded that day. The board looked uncomfortable. One of them, a soft-spoken older guy named Bill, cleared his throat. I wasn't aware of any of this. I don't think many people were. I replied, because Karen does this behind closed doors, through private notes, through vague threats, through rules that don't exist. Karen, sitting across from me, didn't say a word at first, but her face turned red. Her jaw tightened. She looked like a volcano about to erupt. Then she snapped. "He's just bitter because I told him no," she said. "He made a scene. Sabotaged a wedding. This is just payback." "No," I said calmly. "This is accountability." The room went quiet. After the meeting, I went home and waited. And sure enough, a few days later, I got another letter. But this time, it wasn't from Karen. It was from the HOA board. Her fine was dropped. All accusations dismissed. But the letter didn't stop there. It also said the board had voted to temporarily suspend Karen's authority, pending an investigation. I don't think I've ever smiled so hard reading mail in my life. But that wasn't the end. Because while all of this was happening, something else had started to stir, something I hadn't expected. The neighbors. They weren't just mad anymore. They were fed up with years of being pushed around, silenced, and threatened. They started talking to each other, comparing stories, sharing old letters and emails. One woman even pulled out a dusty file folder from her kitchen drawer, full of old fines, meeting notes, and screenshots of texts from Karen. And someone, maybe it was me, maybe it wasn't, started organizing. It began with a group chat, then a few front yard conversations, then a Saturday afternoon potluck in someone's backyard. No Karen, just neighbors, laughing, talking, telling the truth. It felt good, like the neighborhood was waking up from a long nap. They started collecting signatures, quietly but quickly, to call a vote, an official one, to remove Karen from her position as president of the HOA. When the required number of signatures was reached, the date was set. It felt like the finale of a reality show. People showed up in lawn chairs. Someone brought lemonade. There was tension in the air, but also energy, hope. Karen showed up late, wearing sunglasses and a stiff smile. She didn't say much, just sat at the front like nothing was wrong. The board went through the motions. They opened the meeting, read the petition, and called for the vote. Hands went up, one after another, almost everyone. The silence after was heavy. Final. Karen stood up. Her hands were shaking. She didn't make a speech, didn't apologize, just grabbed her bag and walked out. No one followed her. After that, things started changing. Slowly but noticeably. The HOA board began reviewing all her past fines and rules. A bunch were tossed out. Neighbors who'd been avoiding each other started waving again. Smiles came back. Even the guy who got fined for his unapproved garden gnome put back on his lawn with a tiny sign next to it that said, "Karen Free Zone." And me? I cleaned out the pool. It took a while, more than a few hours with a wet vac and a whole lot of scrubbing. But eventually it was back to normal. Clear, clean, peaceful. Sometimes I'd sit out there in the evenings, legs in the water, listening to the sound of sprinklers and kids riding bikes nearby. No Jello, no shouting, no HOA nonsense. Just the quiet kind of peace that comes when you finally stop letting people walk all over you. And it wasn't just my peace. It was the whole neighborhood's. Because once someone stands up, it gives everyone else permission to do the same. The days after Karen's fall from grace were strange. I thought I'd feel a rush of satisfaction, like I had finally won the battle and taken back control. But the truth was, it was quieter than I expected. The whole ordeal had dragged on for so long. Between the fines, a constant tension, the strange little game she played. That once it was over, it felt like the air had been let out of a balloon. Everything just deflated. Karen didn't show her face in the neighborhood for weeks. Her house was still there, but it felt like it was empty. I didn't see her car parked in the driveway anymore. She wasn't at the mailbox or walking her dog. And that made things, well, peaceful, almost too peaceful. It was like she was a shadow that had finally faded, and no one missed her. But the real shift came from the neighbors. They started seeing each other differently. It wasn't about the pool or the wedding anymore. It was about the way they'd all been living in fear. Not the kind of fear that's obvious. It wasn't like we were all terrified of Karen, but it was more subtle than that. It was a fear of what would happen if we didn't follow her rules. The fear that if we stepped out of line, we'd be reported, fined, ostracized. And that fear, it had been a part of the neighborhood for too long. Long before I'd even moved in. Now that Karen was out, there was this new sense of freedom that started to spread. People were talking about the things they wanted to do, but didn't feel like they could, about how they could finally breathe without constantly checking over their shoulder, without worrying about some petty complaint or an anonymous letter on their door. I wasn't the only one who felt it. We all did. It didn't happen overnight. The change wasn't instant, but slowly. Conversations started happening in front yards, over garden fences, and during casual chats by the mailboxes. I wasn't the only one who started stepping up. Either people who had kept their heads down for years suddenly found their voices. Mrs. Jenkins down the street, the one who always kept her lawn perfectly trimmed, had a new fire in her. She started talking about how she didn't have to abide by arbitrary lawn height rules anymore. She even put up a new garden gnome. A big one, too. One that was right on her front lawn, just daring anyone to complain about it. And then there was Mr. Hamilton, the quiet guy who always wore his sunglasses, no matter the weather. He'd been silent for years, as if he didn't want to draw attention. But after Karen was gone, I saw him standing in his front yard with a couple of neighbors, talking about how he'd been fined for not having a suitable tree in his front yard. Apparently, Karen didn't like the type of tree he had, so she'd send him a fine. The whole thing was ridiculous, and he was finally ready to fight back. The most satisfying part? Watching the rest of the board members squirm. They had to start answering questions about why they'd allowed Karen to do what she did for so long. They hadn't been as involved as they should have been. They were complicit in letting her rule the HOA like her own personal fiefdom. And now, they were backpedaling. The HOA was forced to do a reevaluation. The entire system was getting an overhaul. A new president was elected. Bill, the quiet guy who'd always been too scared to speak up, became the new head of the HOA. The first thing he did was apologize to everyone. He admitted that they had allowed Karen to have too much power for too long. And that was huge. For Bill, for the neighbors, for everyone. I had to admit, I was surprised. I didn't expect Bill to have the guts to stand up, especially after everything that had happened. But there he was, offering a sincere apology and committing to making changes. He said they'd work together to make sure something like this never happened again. He even promised to send out a full review of all the fines that had been issued under Karen's leadership. People started to believe him. They actually trusted him. The changes started to come in quickly. The HOA became more transparent. They held meetings that everyone was invited to. There was an open dialogue. No more secret fines. No more power-hungry neighbors pushing their weight around. We were all in this together, or at least that's what it felt like. And even though Karen had disappeared from our daily lives, her shadow still loomed large. We'd never forget how she made us all feel like we were walking on eggshells. How she turned something as simple as owning a home into a stressful, anxiety-ridden experience. We wouldn't let that happen again. But there was still one last piece of unfinished business that I hadn't expected to deal with. Karen, she didn't just disappear. I found out through the grapevine that she'd been planning to sue me. Yeah, you heard that right. After everything that had happened, she still thought she could win. Still thought she could come after me for ruining her daughter's wedding. She'd apparently been talking to lawyers, telling them I'd intentionally destroyed her event and caused irreparable damage to her reputation. At first, I didn't know whether to laugh or be angry. I wasn't even sure what she thought she'd accomplish. But part of me understood. She had spent so many years controlling everyone, making them follow her rules, that I think she genuinely believed she could keep doing it, no matter how ridiculous it was. I wasn't worried, though. Not anymore. I had the footage. I had the letters. I had the community behind me. I wasn't about to let her drag me through another round of pointless drama. Still, there was a strange feeling of closure. Even though I was more than ready to move on, a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that Karen wasn't finished yet, that she still thought she could win, that she still thought she had control. And then one afternoon, she showed up. I was sitting in my living room, going through some paperwork, when I heard a knock at the door. I opened it, and there she was, standing on my porch. She looked different, smaller somehow, tired. The usual perfectly styled hair was limp, her clothes disheveled, and her usual tight-lipped smile was gone. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice surprisingly quiet. I didn't say anything at first, just stood there, unsure what to do. Part of me wanted to shut the door and walk away, but the other part of me, the part that had been pushed around for so long, that part wanted to hear what she had to say. She didn't wait for an invitation. She stepped inside, almost like she expected me to offer her a seat. I didn't. "I know you're not scared of me anymore," she started, her eyes scanning the room, avoiding mine. "But I need you to understand something." She paused like she was trying to figure out what to say, but the words never seemed to come out right. She just stared at her feet, shifting uncomfortably. "I lost everything," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I lost the HOA. I lost my position. My reputation's ruined. And it's all because of you." I felt a twinge of sympathy, but just a twinge, because I knew she wasn't really sorry. She was just looking for someone to blame, and I wasn't going to be that person. "You didn't lose everything," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You just lost control. You never cared about anyone else's rights or happiness. You only cared about getting your way. And when you didn't get it, you tried to destroy everything around you." Her face hardened, but she didn't argue. "I didn't come here for an apology," she said suddenly, lifting her chin. "I came to tell you that you haven't heard the last of me." I stared at her, waiting for the words to sink in, but instead of being afraid, I felt nothing. Not fear, not anger, just nothing. I'd already fought her battle, and I'd already won. She couldn't hurt me anymore. "I'll be fine," I said, turning away, "and so will the neighborhood." She stood there for a second longer before turning and walking out the door, her heels clicking against the floor. I closed it behind her, then leaned against the doorframe, breathing deeply. And just like that, Karen was gone. Out of my life, out of the neighborhood, out of our way. I didn't need to do anything else. The change had already been made, and this time I was truly at peace.